Okay, picture this. It's December 1952. A nasty winter cold snap has its grip on London. A thick fog starts to roll in, which, is nothing new for a city that's famous for its pea soupers. But this was something else entirely. Over 5 short days, what looked like normal weather was about to become a toxic killer blanket that would bring the biggest city in the world to its knees.
And when they say mere yards, they're not kidding. In some spots, people literally couldn't see their own feet. This wasn't just fog you couldn't see through. It was a physical thing. It was a grimy, black, sulfur-stinking ooze that just coated every single surface, seeped right into people's homes, and completely paralyzed the city. All transportation just stopped. Criminals could vanish in an instant, and regular Londoners were getting hopelessly lost on streets they'd walked their whole lives. The human cost of this was just staggering. The first official number they announced was a shocking 4,000 deaths. But as we've learned more and analyzed the long-term effects over the next few months, the real number of premature deaths is closer to 12,000. To put that in perspective, that's a higher death toll than the worst cholera outbreaks of the Victorian era or even the worst periods of the Blitz. A weather event did that.
Now, Londoners were used to fog. They had affectionate nicknames for it, right? The pea souper. It was part of the city's whole vibe, something you'd see in paintings or read about in novels. But this was different. This wasn't a London particular. This was a true killer fog, a chemical disaster that came from a horribly unique and deadly mix of circumstances.
Just listen to that quote for a second. It really captures what it must have felt like. Can you imagine breathing in air so thick with coal soot that you could feel the grit between your teeth? People said it tasted metallic, it smelled like rotten eggs, and it left this greasy black film on your skin, on your clothes, even on the furniture inside your house. There was absolutely no escaping it.
And behind those huge statistics were thousands and thousands of devastating personal stories. Take Rosemary Merritt, who was just a schoolgirl at the time. For her, this smog wasn't just some weird weather. Her dad, who worked at a bus garage and already had bronchitis, had to walk for an hour and a half just to get home through that toxic soup. She remembered him stumbling through the door, barely able to breathe. As he got worse and his skin started to turn blue, they called the doctor, but the doctor couldn't get through the fog. He ended up dying while his wife and daughter were out, desperately trying to find him medicine. Stories just like that were happening in homes all across London.
So how on earth does a regular fog become a mass killer? Well, the answer is a perfect storm of environmental, industrial, and even political factors all coming together at once. Let's break down exactly how this disaster was made.
Okay, so it all started with that really bitter cold snap. That meant millions of Londoners were burning way more coal than usual to keep their homes warm. Now, here's the first big problem. The coal they were burning was cheap, low-grade stuff, just packed with sulfur. Why? Because all the good quality British coal was being exported to help pay off war debts. And then came the final deadly ingredient, a weather phenomenon called a temperature inversion. Basically, a layer of warm air settled high above the city, acting like a giant lid, trapping all that cold, smoky air underneath. The sulfur dioxide from the smoke then mixed with the water droplets in the fog, and through a chemical reaction, created a fine mist of corrosive sulfuric acid. People were breathing acid directly into their lungs. And the sheer amount of pollution was just mind-boggling. Every single day during the smog, the city's chimneys were pumping out thousands of tons of this junk into that trapped air. We're talking 1,000 tons of smoke particles, 370 tons of sulfur dioxide. Day after day, with nowhere to go, the air just got thicker and more poisonous. It was a city stewing in its own toxic brew. What's really wild is how slowly the city figured out what was really happening. At first, all the news was about the traffic jams and a supposed crime wave. The true horror only started to become clear when the systems that deal with death just broke. Undertakers literally couldn't keep up. They ran out of coffins. Florists ran out of flowers for all the funerals. That's when it started to sink in that this was way more than just bad fog.
So, what about the government's response to all this? Well, let's just say it was not great. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, was actually in London at the time, but didn't make a single public comment. The Housing Minister, Harold Macmillan, wrote in his diary that the best they could do was seem to be very busy. The attitude was almost that this was just the price you paid for being a big industrial nation.
But you can't ignore 12,000 deaths. The sheer, undeniable scale of this disaster finally shattered decades of complacency. The public outcry was massive, and it forced a very reluctant government to finally do something. This event became the catalyst for a total revolution in environmental law. It was a huge shift in public health, from just focusing on germs to finally realizing that the environment itself could make an entire city sick.
So the government set up a committee, led by a guy named Sir Hugh Beaver, to figure this all out. And the Beaver Report, which came out in 1954, was a landmark. It didn't just suggest a few new rules, it laid out a whole new strategy. Things like banning dark smoke, creating smokeless zones, and even giving people money to convert their old fireplaces. And for the first time, it put a number on the damage, estimating that pollution was costing the country £250 million a year.
That report led directly to the Clean Air Act of 1956. This was a pioneering piece of environmental law, a real game changer. It went right after the most obvious problem, the visible smoke from all those coal fires. But, and this is a huge but, it wasn't perfect. It had some serious blind spots. It didn't do anything about invisible pollutants like sulfur dioxide and, crucially, it completely ignored the growing threat of diesel fumes from cars and trucks.
And that, of course, brings us to today. The pea supers are gone, London's air is visibly cleaner, but the threat from air pollution? Oh, it hasn't gone away. It's just changed its disguise. It's evolved from an obvious, visible enemy into an invisible one.
Yeah, the whole nature of the threat has shifted. Back in '52, the killer was obvious, right? It was that thick, yellow, sooty smoke from coal. Today, the killer is invisible. It's things like nitrogen dioxide and these microscopic particles called PM 2.5, and they come mainly from vehicle emissions. These things are so tiny they get deep into our lungs and can even get into our bloodstream.
And if you're wondering why that shift happened, well, just look at the numbers. Back in the 1950s, there were about 4 million vehicles on the roads in the UK. By 2010, that number had absolutely exploded to 35 million. Our pollution problem has basically moved from the chimney to the tailpipe.
The heartbreaking reality of this invisible killer hit home with the tragic death of a 9-year-old girl named Ella Adu Kisi-Debra in 2013. After a long fight by her mother, a second inquest made history. Ella became the first person in the UK, and maybe the world, to have air pollution officially listed as a cause of death on her death certificate. And the coroner's conclusion was just chilling. There is no safe level for this kind of pollution.
And this is the number that should really give us all pause. Today, it's estimated that around 4,000 Londoners still die prematurely every single year because of the long-term effects of air pollution. Does that number sound familiar? It's the exact same number as the initial death toll announced for the Great Smog of 1952. The killer is just a lot quieter now.
So, the Great Smog taught us an incredibly hard lesson. We got rid of the visible pea super, and that was a massive victory for public health, no doubt about it. But the fight against air pollution is nowhere near over. The enemy just got a lot harder to see, which really leaves us with this final question to think about. Have we truly escaped the killer fog, or has it just learned how to hide?